Good morning, everybody. My name is Michaela Sullivan. I am one of the training managers here at National Energy Action, and I have the privilege to welcome you all to Liverpool and to our annual conference. We've got an itinerary, full packed for the next 2 days, some fantastic sessions. And for myself, I am doubly excited because this is my first conference. In a previous life, this time last year, I was actually a teacher, and when my director asked me if I would do the housekeeping for today, I said, sure, no problem. There's no way a room of 350 delegates can be as intimidating as 1,000 14 to 18-year-olds in an assembly, but now I'm stood here, I've changed my mind. So it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you, and today we'll be in here this morning until about 1 o'clock. We do have a comfort break at 11:10, and you are encouraged, please go and speak to our exhibitors. I myself will be on the training stand with the partnerships team. We would love to meet you, would love to hear about all of the things that you are doing and what kind of synergies we might all have together. After the break is at 10:11 to 11:45, and then we'll be back here until lunch at 1 p.m. This afternoon we have 3 breakout rooms. 2 of them are on this level and easily accessible. If you're unable to attend the third one, please don't worry. It's been recorded and that session will be available to you after the conference. If at any point you forget any of the things that I'm saying, we're very lucky. Your festival lanyard here has it all printed on the back for you. There will be NEA staff around directing you to the 3 breakout rooms, and then this afternoon we are back in here for our afternoon sessions. We thought about it, but we decided that we wouldn't put a fire alarm on today. So if a fire alarm does happen, please take it seriously and follow the green signs and exit out to the front of the building. If today, we are trying to, as you imagine, raise the profile of all of the fantastic work that we do. So if you do post or tweet about today's conference, please tag us, National Energy Action, and also the hashtag Fuel Poverty Conference. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to National Energy Action's annual conference. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome our CEO, Adam Scorer.
That's a long way. Welcome to, I should know what number this is in a regular series of conferences, but I don't. But welcome to the conference. Well, I hope you like the venue. There's a sign that says no dancing on the table. Now that is directed against NEA staff who have a history of doing that. Birmingham, Scarborough, I can remember of a couple of occasions when that's happened, but take that not too seriously. So first of all, kind of welcome. It's a packed room. I love it when it's standing room only. I know it's not great for people standing. There are some seats up the front, but we've got about 350 people here for that, and it's absolutely fabulous. I'd like to few thanks, first of all, eVouchers for sponsoring the conference. Unless you have a sponsor, you don't have a conference. So we're immensely grateful to them. They have a stall. Please go and see them. Octopus for sponsoring the 10 bursary places that we have this year, and actually Octopus for lots of other fundraising they do for us. We introduced the bursaries a couple of years ago. Why we didn't do it before, God only knows. It adds depth and authenticity. It makes the conversation so much better, and it reminds us while we're here, organisations that have better things to do with their money than fund people to come to the NEA conference. To the exhibitors, please do go around the exhibition stands. They're a vital part of the community of effort to tackle fuel poverty. They're an integral and vital part of NEA as a community, family organisation, so please do that. I hope you like the conference centre. It's got that combination of urban grit, realism, a kind of sparkly positivity, but an underlying efficiency as well. Now, it's a pretty good way of describing NEA on a good day, but I hope you appreciate it. It's a storm-racked city, over the past couple of days, but the flags are flying, the stands are there, and we're all here. We had Richard Kemp, Lord Mayor of Liverpool, yesterday to open the exhibition. And what we said last night is pretty relevant, really. Liverpool's a great place to have this conference. We know the challenges that Liverpool has, how highly it scores income deprivation, health inequalities, unemployment, disability rates. Across the board, it has a very challenging situation as a city. But of course, it's known for its resilience, for its leadership, and for its sense of partnership and community. Never walk alone and all that. So it's a great place to have the conference, and it reminds us of some of the challenges that we have as a movement trying to address the stubborn challenge of fuel poverty. And we often brand these things beyond the energy crisis, not because we are beyond the energy crisis, or because for our clients there's ever an end to crisis, to be honest, but that focus, that aspiration, that the purpose of coming together is to think ourselves beyond crisis, beyond the urgency and the necessity and the need for hard-nosed pragmatism, to some thought about, well, what would it mean? What would it look like to have a structure and a policy framework that gave us the chance to think about actually ending fuel poverty rather than ameliorating the edges of an energy crisis. Other sessions will deal with the context much better than I can. We have great speakers from a range of organizations who will spell out the realities, the day-to-day realities of our context. Needless to say, 6 million households in fuel poverty, however you want to define it and however you want to frame it, not precious about the term, but we know there's 6 million people who we think are spending at least 10% of their income to afford a decent level of heat and power. We talk about £4 billion of household energy debt. I think that underplays it, and of course that's people in debt arrangements, so there is a huge debt crisis as well. We know that we used to talk, and the height of the crisis affects everybody. It's broadened the extent of the fuel poverty issues. Many people who never would have thought themselves under stress are seeing those same sorts of challenges, thinking about rationing, thinking about whether they can afford energy. And I love a cliche and a truism, and I think I may have used it last year as well, but so what? Same boat, different storms. You know, the universality is right, but we know that those people who are most likely to cut off, not just cut back, to ration or self-disconnect, massively more likely if you're on a low income, if you're older, if you're a tenant, especially social tenant, if you have a health condition. That's true for people who are going to self-disconnect. It's true for those people exposed to debt. We know that massively our client group, 25% single parents, 97% can't afford to keep their homes warm, high 70s% have at least one health condition associated and made worse by living in a cold home. We know the cohorts, those people in our community who suffer the most. Another cliche that I've been guilty of using too many times, and it is true, but actually we're seeing the limits of its truth. That as a mission, as a movement, as a group of people all committed to working against kind of fuel poverty, we said we need to be bigger. Well, actually, we are bigger than the sum of our parts, but we really need to live that. And that's true, especially when you're responding to a crisis. You make the best package for a client that you can out of the support mechanisms that are available. You create and you embed partnerships with those people you think can reach the people that you need to reach and can bring together that expertise and those services to provide the biggest input. So it's hugely important. It always will be that we're bigger than the sum of our parts, and the partnerships in this room show that. But at the risk of being a bit Sid Jamesy from Carry On films, our parts ain't big enough. You know, size matters to an extent. That being bigger than the sum of our parts is not an adequate solution to that context I just mentioned. We need to have greater heft. We need to have greater scale. Focused as much, and the minister will, I think, will find this when she walks around the exhibition, people whose primary concern is, what about this income stream that I'm reliant on? What about this package of measures that I've been using and my organization is used to using to build packages of support? What about continuity? What about being able to maintain the services that we provide? And at the same time, the same people, I'll be one of them, will be saying, at the same time, you've got to imagine a solution that's fit for the challenge of fuel poverty, something that's scale, something that shifts the dial, something that changes the environment, something that you can hang your hat on, that we have a strategy to tackle fuel poverty, not just ameliorate the impacts of an energy crisis. So I know that Miatta, the Minister, first of all, delighted that you're here with us. You probably will say, but I apologise, new MP, but already Energy Consumers Minister, which is a great title, but also, as well as her experience in government, her leadership of the NEF, leading on New Green Deal, leading on just transition, thinking of the impact on low-income households, wanting to make sure that policy frameworks are driven and bold, but fair and evidenced. It's great to have a minister with that background. One of the challenges that the minister has got, of course, and we'll be saying it in our sessions a lot, either explicitly or implicitly, is the challenge of the Warm Homes Plan. And I know it's an immediate one, and spending reviews wait for no one, no man, no woman, no minister, let alone any energy charity. So I think it's a pretty urgent one. We don't have a session that says Warm Homes Plan. But I think every conversation that's going to happen in this room and in the other rooms, and if you can find them, that's great. If you can't find them, don't ask me, ask somebody else. And in all the sessions that we have, every speaker, every question, every conversation around the sides, every thought that you take away with you in some way will inform either the development and the design of a warm home plan that's fit for purpose, but it will certainly help to think through the implementation challenges and opportunities that will flow from that plan. So we're hugely excited. So we haven't got a session on it. NEA staff will be making sure that they try and distill the conversations in a way that give us something to hand over to the department. They've got a very flimsy suggestion box. And I really would urge you just to find a scrap of paper and write down your top priorities, ideas, or anxieties about the development of the Warm Homes Plan, because it will help us kind of contribute to it. Foolishly left a bunch of my business cards on our stand, so if you take one away and drop me an email, that'd be great. Please do take a business card. Whatever's left of my vanity won't survive that pile not being diminished by the end of the session, so I'm sure that NEA staff will just kind of quietly shove them in the bin if they're not taken. But please do use it, because we're serious. The fundamental challenge for NEA is an organization that supports individual households and communities, that tries to raise awareness of the scale and the incidence and the causes and the available solutions to fuel poverty. But we're also one that wants to change the world for people living in fuel poverty. And we're aware that we've got ideas and we've got skilled people, but look at this. This is the room where those hard-won experiences and ideas can be channeled in, and they have to be channeled in. The greatest mistake that we could possibly make is just to sit back and wait to see what plan forms, how it's communicated, and how it's implemented, and then to say, well, I wouldn't have done it like that. We can't allow ourselves the luxury of hindsight. We have to give ourselves the responsibility of collaboration and input. For my point, in the Warm Homes Plan, there's an aim, and I think it's one that will be shared. It's a plan for warm homes. Clearly, it has to sit within the context of the Clean Energy Plan, the mission to be a clean energy superpower domestically and industrially, and to drive low-carbon heating technologies, but the exam question is how it can contribute to affordably warm homes. For some people, that will be low carbon heating technologies. For others, it will be insulation. There'll be lots of other reasons. But that's the motive force. That's the exam question we're looking to answer. And it's a complicated question. All I can offer, I think, is what I would think is three of the key principles that should drive not only its development, but how we all live it, because we will all want to and have to live it. And the first, which is a carryover from the previous government, which is this principle of the worst first, by which I do not mean focus on those suboptimal property assets that are hard to treat and hard to retrofit and have them as your priority. I mean those unheated people, those people who are living in homes which they're not able to keep affordably and safely warm. That's what we mean when we say worst first. It is not about the asset or the property. For us, it is always about the lived experience of inhabiting a home, a place of refuge and respite and comfort and joy. It is not just about the efficiency of the home, but that worst first principle must be a guiding one for us. The second one will be about national design and local delivery. I think it's clear that if the Minister and her colleagues are able to win scale finance through the Treasury or find other ways of leveraging it, it needs to be spent efficiently. It needs to address some of the slight chaos that always emerges when you have a series of ad hoc arrangements that grow up over decades and you try to make things work, and it's got to provide some drive and some leadership, some standards, some expectation and some results, but it's going to be delivered locally. No action plan survives first contact with the enemy, that enemy's fuel poverty, unless it coalesces and mobilizes all those local players. So we're really aware. We have Steve Rotherham joining us tomorrow morning. We're in Liverpool with great leadership. 30 miles across the road, across the country, you've got Andy Burnham's Manchester. 40 miles up the A59, you've got Preston and Fyshwick. And that experience and that leadership and that ability to leverage other organisations that may be possible and dramatic and driven in Manchester ain't the same situation as for those local authorities who are hollowed out, who lack the experience, who lack the resilience, who lack that leveraging power. So national design, yes, and that might need some institutional form. Local delivery, absolutely, because it's going to need that coalition of partners to be able to deliver it. And the third one is make it bigger than the sum of its parts, is to make it a transformative agenda that speaks to the range of government missions, whether it's about education, whether it's about childhood poverty, whatever it would be, embed it into the heft of the government's mission and break it out of the confines of the department. So we'd have those principles for driving the Warm Homes Plan. But as I said, let's not come here next year or come somewhere else with even better fluffy clouds and spangly curtains and say, you know, if only we'd been able to get these messages across about the necessary and the sufficient conditions for warm home plans that would work. So that's what I would say. We're going to play a little video experience, then I'll invite the Minister to come up. But I'll say one more thing, and I'm sure the Minister will mention it as well. There's lots of organisations in this room who are involved with the insulation industry one way or another. NEA welcomes and supports the bold step the Minister took last year about demanding standards and consumer protection for all, but especially for vulnerable households. No households need it more. The other thing that we would like to come out of this event is some realization. Another cliche truism is that the plan requires the supply chain, a skilled and effective supply chain across the country. There are really good elements of that supply chain in this conference and in this exhibition. We all work with people who are committed. We work to train people to spot vulnerability to respond with hand-holding, to show care and attention, to treat folk like you would treat your mother when you go into those homes. There is the core commitment and will, capacity and skill across the supply chain to make sure that the Warm Homes Plan can land with care and attention and standards and outcomes for human beings. And we should make sure that that's part of the narrative and the opportunity, as well as some of the challenges. We've got a couple of days together. It's always the highlight of our year, bringing everyone together, recognizing how we can fill the gaps in our understandings, new conversations, new partnerships, new friends. And so we're going to play a video in just 1 second, then I'll be delighted to invite a new friend, a minister with a huge amount to give to our movement, to join me on stage. But if we could play a quick video.
My name's Alicia. I'm from Grimsby. I live in rented accommodation with my 2 children. And life's pretty tough at the moment in all aspects. This house in winter can be very, very cold. Last winter was a struggle because my gas boiler got condemned. So we struggled last winter. And this winter we're going to struggle even more because I can't afford to put the heating on. I'm in debt with my energy bills. I was on a pay monthly scheme. I've had to turn to a pay-as-you-go. I've still got debt on the meters to cover that cost, but then I'm still struggling to top up my meters to sustain everything. My children don't like being cold, especially with my son, because he's sensory. He's got big sensory needs and sometimes he doesn't like being too warm, but the cold greatly affects him. My daughter, it affects her eczema. So it is a great impact. And I've even had to cut back on stuff with them to make sure I can keep a roof over their head. They don't go out on outings, can't afford to take them to the local leisure centre, or even clothing sometimes. I had to get an advance on my universal credit just to afford the things they needed, which is sad.
My name is Raymond, and this is a flat in Grimsby. My gas previously has been capped off because I couldn't really afford to run it, and it was just too expensive. You know, you've got the standing charges, because when I use my gas, it's mainly in the winter, and when it comes to winter and I top up the gas, I look at the standing charges and it's built up to about £80 or something ridiculous like that, and I'm like, oh no, I can't really be doing with that, so I had it capped off.
I've lived in Leicester for 20 years. My name is Patricia Stander. It's a 1-bedroom flat on the 2nd floor. The bills have become expensive. I actually felt almost afraid to get a bill, and I check my reader meeting weekly, and I check to see how much I'm using to make sure that I'm not going over. I'm annoyed because I don't understand why my bill has gone up when I'm cutting down. I just find because we're old, we feel the cold.
Natural Energy Action provided a support package with draft excluders, stuff for the radiators, stuff to help the house keep a bit warmer and stop the draft.
The National Energy Action has helped me to get my gas back up and running, which has been great. So this winter, I won't have to do silly things like put the cooker on if I want to keep warm. Helps me with energy vouchers, helps me with budgeting ideas, suggested they use a smart meter.
They gave me a lot of hints how to save money. I got that lovely warm jacket that I use and my lovely torch. So I'm not switching lights on and off. and they looked at my bill to see where I'm saving, because I was a little bit worried that I was overspending on my bills. So I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you. Conference, can you welcome Miatta Fahnbulleh, the Energy Minister?
Good morning, everyone. It is absolutely fantastic to join you today in this incredible venue. I have to say it's a venue I know well because it's a feature of Labour Party conferences and Dawn Butler's famous Jamaican night. It's a very different setup to tonight, but it feels nice to be home. Look, I wanted to start by saying a huge thank you to all of you for everything you do to protect the most vulnerable people in our society. Your work makes an incredible difference on the front line of this energy crisis, and I can't tell you how grateful I am and my department is for everything that you do. And when you see videos like that, it just brings home both the scale of the problem that we're battling with, but the huge, huge contribution and work that you are all putting in. Look, I'm in the fortunate position where I get to work with charities like National Energy Action, and in any given week, I also get to speak with decision makers at the top of our energy industry. I suspect that many people experiencing fuel poverty would jump at the chance to have a one-to-one meeting with their energy company. And that's something I carry always with me in this job. I feel a real responsibility to advocate for the millions of people experiencing fuel poverty, because in many instances, I know that they've advocated for themselves and it's fallen on deaf ears. That's something I feel strongly about because it's been at the heart and the story of my career so far. Now, Adam said before I moved into politics, I was an economist. And my personal mission and the thing that has driven every stage of my career was finding ways to make the economy work for people. Because all too often, I saw, like you see, that things aren't working for too many people in our society. And so today, as Minister for Energy Consumers, I have the privilege, but also acute sense of duty that I have to do everything I can to try and improve things for people for as long as I'm in this job. But look, to do that, I'm very, very clear that you have to start with understanding the context in which you're working in, and we have to understand the context in which we are trying to make this change. We are living through the worst cost of living crisis for a generation, and energy bills are the face of that crisis. And I say this every time. The thing with energy, it is an essential good. It is not a luxury good. It is not a nice to have. It is foundational for people's lives. And the bleak truth is that for too many people, it is simply unaffordable. And, you know, everywhere I go, I hear stories of those who are suffering, those who are battling with the consequence of this. And in one of the NAA's case studies, you spoke with a man named Jared, and he said something that has stuck in my mind. You either heat or you eat. We can live, but it's just existing. And the tragedy is Jared isn't alone. In England, around 13% are living in fuel poverty, but it varies regionally. Here in Liverpool, the latest figures suggest that as many as 1 in 6 households. And as bills get higher and households get poorer, many people are finding that the jobs that were supporting a family a decade or two ago are classing them now as fuel poor. And the situation we've inherited are the results of many years of dithering, and we are quite clear. The status quo is unacceptable, the status quo is untenable, and we absolutely have to do everything that we can to change that. So fixing this, we know, will take time. I wish I could click my fingers and it could happen instantly. It will take time. But please be assured, we are very clear that fix it we must, and that there is urgency behind doing that, which is why we are trying to run at this as a government. Last year, I spent a lot of time meeting with industry to get us prepared for this winter. And as a result, 15 energy suppliers came together to build a winter commitment. In collaboration with the government, Energy UK, they made £500 million of industry support available for those that need it. This includes a range of support like credit on bills, enhanced debt write-offs, reduced standing charges. And this sits alongside our Warm Homes discount that provides over 3 million households in fuel poverty with rebates on their energy bills. Together, £1 billion of support has gone into helping customers that need it the most this winter. On top of that, the cold weather payment provides eligible households with £25 for each 7-day period of very cold weather. And we've also extended the household support fund. A start, critical to get people through this winter, but we know it is not enough. So we are trying to look at how we fix things and get to the root cause. And that means taking a long-term approach. It cannot become the status quo for us to have millions of people living in fuel poverty. So as we take short-term action to protect the most vulnerable, which we must do this winter and we must do next winter, we also need to make sure that we are fixing the root cause and getting people off the path towards fuel poverty. First, let's look at renters. You may be aware that we'll be consulting on energy efficiency standards in the private rented sector. Now, we know that England's private rented sector has the highest rate of fuel poverty across all of housing. Around a quarter of private rented sector are in fuel poor. What we're looking to do is to reduce their energy bills by raising the minimum EPC standard so that people are no longer caught in the trap of high private rents, high energy bills, and cold homes. And I suspect many people in this room will have valuable inputs to put into that consultation, so I encourage you to feed into it when it is published. But second, we're upgrading hundreds of thousands of homes because we believe that that is one of the best ways in which we can reduce energy bills. Our Warm Homes plan will, as a first step, see an initial £3.4 billion invested over the next 3 years in heat decarbonisation and energy efficiency. Our aim is that we massively speed up and ramp up installations of everything from heat pumps, solar, batteries, and insulation for up to 5 million households. And we also look to double the budget for the boiler upgrade scheme so that almost 40,000 households can get £7,500 off the cost of a heat pump this year. Now, we've announced 2 key schemes, the Social Housing Fund and the Warm Homes Local Grant, which will look to help low-income households in the worst quality homes with upgrades. Next year alone, through a combination of grants and investment that will come through ECO, we hope to unlock £3.2 billion to upgrade up to 300,000 homes. Now, this is a good start. It's a step from where we were and what we inherited, but it is not enough. And we are determined that as we roll out our plan, we increase the scale of ambition, we increase the scale of delivery so that we can make sure that we're touching more households and helping more people out of fuel poverty. Third, look, something that I've seen and we've repeatedly found is that people have fundamentally lost trust in our energy market. And we have announced a review of Ofstem to ensure that we have a regulator that has the powers, the mandate, the skills, the responsibility in order to be that consumer champion that we need. And we've taken, quite a wide-ranging view through the review, and we're looking at everything from powers for consumer protection, processes like automatic compensation for poor performance, and even the role of the Energy Ombudsman. I think this is a huge opportunity. I think the regulator has a huge job that it's doing well, constrained by the resources, the remit, and the powers it has. And this is a chance for us to have a regulator and to design the framework for a regulator that can fundamentally act on the behalf of consumers. But look, lastly, there is our clean power mission. And you'll hear the government talk a lot about this. And I want to say why we think this is the long-term solution for lower bills. Once we've improved energy efficiency, overall energy demand will jump. Once we've achieved clean power, we believe that the cost to energy will be cheaper. And that means lower bills, not just for one winter, but for decades to come. That's why we're investing in technologies like offshore wind, nuclear, and solar. And ultimately, our goal is to end our dependence on international fossil fuel markets that are volatile, that we cannot control, so that we have homegrown clean energy that we can ensure will deliver fair pricing across our energy market and prevent the exploitation of wholesale energy prices, which fundamentally hurts consumers. The result, if we get all of this right, is that we will have a system that not just delivers our goals on net zero, which we must, but fundamentally reduces the cost of energy in this country. That is our plan for addressing fuel poverty. But look, there's one final point that I must make, because I can't help it. I think it's a feature of being an economist that you've always got to take a step back. And that's why I really want to kickstart a discussion on how we understand fuel poverty. By current metrics, around 3 million people are living in fuel poverty today. That's what I'm told, that's what the statistics I'm given tell me. But that metric doesn't account for how people feel. In fact, I'm quite sure if we were to go out, and you will know better than I do, and interview people across the country, would see that far more than 3 million people will feel that they fit that definition of being in fuel poverty. Because energy costs are such a big portion of where people's incomes go. So as a government, we will continue to act on the technical definition of fuel poverty because we must make progress. The trajectory we've inherited is not going to deliver the targets that we have in legislation, and we have to address that. But we can also look at the wider question of affordability. You know, and my view, look, is if we want different results, we have to do things differently. We'll be keeping that in mind in our review of the fuel poverty strategy, which will be published shortly. And again, I would encourage all of you to feed into this because I think it is a critical plank of what we are trying to do as a department. And I'm grateful for those who have already been involved in the process so far, including the NEA, the Centre for Sustainable Energy, Fuel Bank, Citizens Advice, the Committee on Fuel Poverty, Energy UK, and Scope. Fuel poverty is a cross-cutting issue. It's the centre and it's central to the work that the Child Poverty Task Force, which I'm on, is doing, and to our health and our energy mission. And it's why we will continue to make sure that it is a focus. It is why we will continue to offer targeted support like the Warm Homes discount. And we will be looking to build on the Warm Homes discount to ensure that it's supporting more people as we go forward. But I should also say, while we're talking about doing things differently, you may have seen last week our announcement about home insulations and the problems that we have uncovered in our Eco4 and our GB schemes. Look, again, unfortunately, this is another example of something that we've inherited, but that we absolutely must fix. And we've been proactive as a department, working with suppliers, working with Ofgem, working with the supply chain to make sure that we resolve that. And we are very clear. Consumers cannot and must not be asked to pay a penny to fix this problem. And my hope is that through this, we can start to think about the long term and fundamentally how we build on some of the great work that has been done to upgrade people's homes, but how we fundamentally reform the system so that consumer protection is baked in, is the heart of it, and that we can deliver the quality and the standards that we need in order to persuade millions and millions of people to go on this journey with us. And look, let me end here. The premise behind all of this is that there is no single solution to fuel poverty. I know this, you know this. We will need to make bills more affordable, and please be in no doubt that is a massive priority for this government. But if that energy is just seeping out of houses due to the quality of the housing stock, then people will still be overspending. If we're to make a difference, we need to solve the root cause, and that's precisely what we're trying to do through the Warm Homes plans. So we are clear that we have to do things to provide immediate relief to people as we reform the system. But at the same time, we've got to be driving towards the long-term solution so that no household is left behind. And your dedication to fixing fuel poverty is something that I personally admire. And it's something that I am very clear that we as a department want to work in collaboration so that in years to come, we look back and say, there was a system that didn't work for people, and together we did everything within our power to fundamentally change that system. So let me end by thank you again for everything that you have done through years that I know have been incredibly tough. And I look forward to working with you and building an energy market that no longer treats households as end users, but as the starting point for an industry that works with fairness at its heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Miatta. Is this on? Can you hear? Can you hear? Yep, fine, thank you. Oh, I can hear it now. An apology, first of all, I left you waiting on the steps. And if you're out there, given the venue is, you would have seen 3 huge canisters of dry ice. And I apologize for not bringing you on to dry ice, but releasing liquid carbon dioxide in fuel poverty to an energy minister, probably kind of inappropriate. So we've got about just a little over kind of half an hour, and what we asked folk before they came to conference was to put down some questions that we might want to kind of raise with the minister while we had her with her. But can I start with one about the point you made about the kind of the dryness of the definitional quality around kind of fuel poverty, and we know why. It's got to do a job. It's got to be able to align the outputs of energy efficiency schemes against a legal target. So you need a bit of precision about it, something that you can rely on. No one wants to spend another 6 months rethinking that particular algorithmic challenge. But you're alluding to something which is much more of an experiential kind of basis about how we understand and how we respond to it. And I'm just aware that this is an opportunity for people to think through, even if not motivated by a particular equation for generating it, but want to feed into it. Have you got ideas as part of the fuel poverty strategy about how you could capture some of that experiential quality?
Yeah, look, and when we publish our consultation, that's one of the questions that we're going to be asking people to help us create some definition around. And look, my starting point from this is, I understand the legal definition, and just to reassure, there is a priority to make sure that we deliver on that legal definition. And the tragedy is we have inherited a trajectory that looks like we're not even on course to do that. So there is a job to deal with the most severe cases. But it's the experience out there. I spend a lot of time, whether it's my constituency, I spend a lot of time across the country. And you talk to people, and there is an acute affordability problem that they face. And so if you say to them, oh, well, there are only 3 million people that are in fuel poverty, most people don't recognize that. And I think there is a risk that government seems tone deaf. There's a risk that government doesn't seem alive to the problems that people are facing. So I think we both need to do the job of making sure that we do everything to deliver on the technical legal definition that, quite frankly, the last government was failing to do. But we also need to ask ourselves the question of, what does affordability mean? And when we say energy isn't affordable, how do we define that? Now, NAA will say, 10% of incomes. We want to test that. We would argue that is based on a model that's, 20 years in the making. What does it mean today? So that we have a better sense of the overall problem. And that's in the context where we are very clear the energy bills across the piece, not just for low-income families, are too high. And for people who found energy bills affordable 5 years ago, they don't find it today. And so we need a definition that captures that, because that focuses the minds of government in order to think about the response. So we want to try and hold those two things at the same time. So we're going out and saying, we don't have the answer. You know better than we do. Please help us define this so that we can build progress now, but start moving towards a definition where we say energy is affordable, and if it's not affordable, it means this for people.
Excellent. So there's a starter for 10 for the response to the fuel poverty strategy consultation when it comes out. Thank you very much. You mentioned also, and it comes out in some of the questions, about the package of support, financial support that's available to kind of households immediately and in the lead up to next winter, and also the review of Ofgem, and I guess that includes its responsibilities and actions around vulnerability and vulnerable households. So let me read the question from David Miles and Swindon Borough Council, because it's captured in a number of the questions. Will we see a more coordinated approach to supporting vulnerable households in fuel poverty, such as a cross-supplier social tariff developed in time for next winter? And some of the other questions are about those retail financial support mechanisms that we need to get in place really, really quickly. So there's a confidence and a certainty about the packages of support that are available, but especially on a social tariff. What's your feeling about the trajectory? It's not easy at all, but I just wondered where you think your department's at.
Look, so I think the good news is the movement and the ecosystem are very aligned. So my first week in the job, every side, whether it was talking to the charities, whether it was talking to suppliers, whether it was talking to local government, social tariff was the thing I was told. So there is consensus out there about what we need to do. It isn't easy and it's not simple. What I would say is, look, we recognize that we need to do something on bill support, and we're looking at a range of options. Part of the difficulty with the social tariff is that when you dig underneath the skin of it, it means different things to different people. So we're trying to ask ourselves, look, what does the mechanism look like? The warm homes discount, which is a form of social tariff, is the route that we have now. It is live for another winter. So I think the question for me going into next winter is, what are we doing with the warm homes discount to make sure we're getting as much from it as we can? But that scheme comes to an end. So there's a chance for us to then think about, well, what comes next? What have we learned from the warm homes discount that works and doesn't work? What is the state and the context we're in today? And therefore, what does that mean for bill support? We're clear there will be bill support. What that looks like, how we design it in a way that reaches the people that we need to reach with constraints like data and quite frankly, with constraints around both the fiscal context that we're operating with in government, but also, when you look at the polling, what I call social solidarity, the willingness of some bill payers to pay a bit more, to cross-subsidize others, is very low because everyone is struggling. So we're having to navigate through all of that to think about what the best approach is to evolve the warm homes plan, the warm homes discount rather, as we go forward. But the good news is everyone is very aligned at sort of banging on and telling us we need a social tariff. So we've heard the fact that we need to do something. We're trying to figure out the best possible way that we can do it.
Banging on is what we're good at. That's excellent. You mentioned in the answer there, aligned to data, and there was a question from a couple of people, but Derek from Healthy Home Solutions, in general, kind of what steps the government's taking, but actually your role as an economist, what gaps, what absences do you think the government still needs to step into to really exploit data, not just data matching in order to find eligibility, but generally how the power of data can enable you to generate proper solutions to fuel poverty?
So look, in a world where AI is doing some fun, mind-blowing things with data, I think government and the public sector more broadly is very behind. We've got a minister in DSIT that is very on the cusp of this and very, very ambitious about driving data solutions across government. So I think it's a key part of it. We've already begun that work. So, when I was in government a long, long time ago, we were talking about data matching and the fact that different departments hold data sets, and if you could bring them together, we could probably properly target a whole set of solutions. And it was with some horror that I sort of came back 15 years on, and we were still having the same conversations, and nothing had moved on. So I've taken it as a personal mission to try and crack through some of that, because it's so critical for our ability to provide targeted energy support. We're working as a first step with DWP, with the energy suppliers, with charities, with Citizens Advice, to think about, look, how can we, based on DWP data, how can we bring it together so that we can better target? We're having really good conversations, so trying to get to HMRC that sits on a whole load of income data has been a thing that the department's been trying to do for a long time. We are now cracking through that, so I am the most optimistic I've been about our ability to get the raw material, which is the data, and then use precision, algorithms, and targeting to be able to provide better solutions. If there wasn't urgency, I think one of the lessons for us as a government, looking at the last government and looking at the energy crisis, and you think about the energy support mechanisms that we put in place, billions went into it, rightly so. But imagine if we'd had the data to target that and how much more we could have done for those that really needed it, how longer we could have extended that support. So I think there is both, from a fuel poverty perspective, but actually just from government working better, there's a real sense that we've got to crack this. And I think we've got a set of ministers that are willing to kind of just break through some of the traditional barriers that held up progress in this area.
and not just data to target it better, but to understand the impacts of the actual delivery in different cohorts. I meant to say at the beginning, this was billed as a fireside chat. And if anybody doesn't have a very long desk about their fireside to have their conversations, you're missing. It's a treat. You absolutely should do it. Taking the data point a bit further. So for us, it's hugely important because, like many issues, issues like kind of fuel poverty, it waxes and wanes. It kind of hits political kind of sweet points and people align to it, especially we have something like an energy crisis, and then you get a long period of lip service. Kind of off to it. And one of the reasons why we're so keen that in a mission-led government with clearly identified mission, and when kind of ill health inequality and preventative kind of measures on health is so kind of important. I wonder if you've had thoughts or conversations with Wes or others in the team about, because health data is difficult. I remember going to an Ofgem vulnerability summit where you had the Department of Health, of the DWP Department of Health, one of them saying, you can get all the industry data that you want, all the housing survey. The difficult one is to be able to align it with people's health conditions where you're able to identify. Where's the opportunity to try and kind of match those health condition data with the availability of support?
So, huge opportunity. So we're working again with Department of Health, and it's interesting, so I come at this from, we know that there is a cohort of people who have health conditions that means that they're high energy users, and yet we don't really recognize them in the energy system and the support that we provide. But actually health are coming at this from, cold homes, drafty homes are a driver of health conditions that we then have to deal with the health system. And so in a world where we are trying to take a more preventative approach, they are as exercised as we are about how we come together to solve this. Because if you can find those households, you can then provide support upstream in the energy system that then means that they're not getting stuck in hospitals on waiting lists. So there's a lot of collaboration. We've already been in touch. Our officials are working together. I'm actually meeting the minister in charge tomorrow, as it happens, in order to see whether we can very quickly come to a solution that means that we can match our data sets in order to provide far more kind of targeted provision that does the job of prevention.
So let me exploit that moment just very, very quickly. So, Meet the Minister. We have a scheme called Warm Homes Healthy Futures, which is, and there's others.
I know very well,
so,
and it's an inspiration for what we're trying to do.
Catapults, Warmth by Prescription, lots of other organisations have tried to make this confluence work between overworked, overstretched health professionals and energy support schemes. So we do it in a number of regions. And one of the critical points for us in doing that is not just to bring support and advice to people who might otherwise fall out of that structure. It's to learn, it's to generate data about what sort of health professionals, what sort of outcomes, how you can validate outcomes in ways that health economists would understand. So a plea would be for the health ministers is to ensure not just that you utilize the data which already exists in people's case notes and in general condition expertise, but that you generate data from schemes and you understand the data from schemes like ours and say, well, what happens when? What's the return on the investment for people's health conditions when you align conditions, people who are eligible with certain levels of support? So that would be great. If you put that digression, Chair's prerogative, sorry about that. Can I bring you back to the Warm Homes Plan? Because whenever there's a big strategy or a plan, everybody vests everything in it. So everybody in this room will be either hoping or expecting that it will be the primary delivery mechanism for what it is that they want to do. And, surprise, surprise, it's going to have to balance, it's going to have to trade-offs, there'll be winners and losers. So, I mean, the first thing is possibly a little timelines about it. I know it's a government spring, but kind of any ideas about that? And there's a particular question, I've kind of lost the question who it was, I think it was Tommy from OVO, was something about the government's plans for the extension of imperfect, perverse though it can be at times, as part of that timeline planning.
So look, at its simplest, the Warm Homes Plan is aiming to upgrade millions of homes in order to make them warmer and cheaper to run. Very, very simple, incredibly hard to deliver. And look, the first order challenge that we have is we are doing home upgrades, but they're in the hundreds of thousands, and we need to get to the millions. And that is a big, big pivot. That is a big step from where we are, but that is absolutely the ambition. So the thing that the plan is trying to do, when our timelines are spring, and two things: it's not all within our gift because we're trying to align it within the spending round, spending review for reasons that you can understand. But I'm very, very clear that we need to crack on this year, because if we want it to bite by the end of the Parliament, which we absolutely needed to get to the sort of ambition that we have, we've got to do the heavy lifting the first half of this year. So we are running at this, but we are having to align it with the sort of the money side of the equation. But look, the three things for me that it needs to get right is one, there is a big demand job, and I'm really clear, we're not going to force people to do anything. We need to win hearts and minds. And the way that you do that is for people to believe this is a really attractive proposition. And it comes down to bread and butter issues. It comes down to the money in your pocket. So a lot of what we're trying to do on the demand side is, how do we make home upgrades affordable? And that is, how do we support it for low-income families? And that is from insulation through to heat pumps, as solar and batteries. But how do we also make it affordable for those in the middle, so that people are running at us to have this, rather than us having to sort of impose it or enforce it on them. So getting that calculation right is a really big piece of work. But it is about, look, what's the support that we have in the system? What's the technology mix? How are we making that technology mix affordable? And how do we get, price signals within the market to work so that this is an affordable proposition for people? The second is on the supply side, and that is everything from, how are we making sure that we've got a vibrant supply chain, a vibrant installer market that's got the skills in order to do this and can ramp up. There's a big question about the workforce as we try and do this and go from hundreds of thousands to the millions. But it's also making sure that we are providing the support so that, our manufacturers, industry can innovate, producing the next generation of all of these solutions that are good, that are affordable, that are effective for UK properties. And then it's also how we deliver. And, a lot of the heavy lifting on our delivery has been through supply obligations. And there will be a role for suppliers, absolutely, as we move forward. But I think there is a big role for how we take a local and regional approach within that. I don't see us getting to scale unless we're thinking about areas. And I think there is a kind of perversity when you're doing installation building by building. So you'll do this house, all these houses are exactly the same. It might need the same set of measures, but you skip them because they haven't happened to apply to a scheme. We're not going to get to millions that way. So we've got to think about that partnership between the local and suppliers and charities that, for those that are hard to reach, that all the sort of normal traditional mechanisms aren't going to get to them. You need to work with people on the ground that can reach into those households. So getting that delivery mechanism right and making sure that you've got a guiding mind overseeing all upgrades, I think, is a key part of the delivery side. And then the final piece for me is about quality and standards. And, I came into this job very acutely aware that that was a thing that we needed to grip, because if you have examples, and it only needs to be one, when it's not done well, it gets amplified. It kind of gets a folklore status. And we're seeing that candidly in heat pumps. Bad examples are the things that reverberate, so that all the, hundreds of thousands of billion examples we have get lost in that. And so driving up standards across the piece, and, I think the experience of some of the problems that we found in Eco4 and GBUS has focused my minds that we need to make sure that there is quality assurance is absolutely key. The enforcement of that is absolutely key. And why it matters is that this is a confidence game. If people are confident that the things that we are recommending works for them, and it is of good quality, and it delivers for them warmer homes that are cheaper to run, we will ramp this up. If they don't believe that, because there are too many bad examples where we don't get this right, we won't be able to do what we achieve. So getting those sort of three pieces right, for me, is critical. And then the final bit I'd add, which goes to the demand side, which I didn't talk about, and I know there'll be colleagues in the room that will be writing to me saying, you've forgotten this. We know that advice and quality advice about how you navigate a really complex system is really important. And how we get that in a way that is coordinated, how we get that in a way that has national reach, so that when people are thinking about what's the right thing for me, you know who to turn to, you know you'll get advice, and you know that they will hold your hand through a system so that it's as easy as possible for you to do this. Because if we can't do that, we don't get to the millions, and that's what we must need.
And I think that hand-holding aspect is absolutely critical, because advice proximate to a decision and a transaction is all well and good, but the challenges are actually once you've taken that advice and seeing it through to fruition. Just a little bit more on that, because we can all ask for more money. You should have another couple of billion, and we can all say you should do these measures. But with that extra investment, especially if it's state investment, you need the institutional frameworks that's going to make sure it's spent kind of properly. So one of the elements that I think a lot of people, especially people who are budget holders or local authority coordinators or managing agents, let alone installers, will be thinking about is what that institutional framework should look like. So a national agency of sort, what the roles may be, in order to make sure it's not just dispersing money through the same frameworks, but there's ways in which, so we always say, and I said it in my little remarks, it's quite easy to think about how Andy Burnham might be able to drive this through in Greater Manchester with all the leverage. Small little coastal towns, it's much more difficult to think about how they're going to make it work. And there's some of the, so I know the plan's not out yet, but are you able to say a little bit about your thought process in terms of what the principles and primary roles of an agency, whatever it's called, might be?
Yeah, look, so we are definitely in the market for people's ideas and suggestions on this. We know that we have inherited a system that is too fragmented, that is a bit of a patchwork where there isn't a guiding mind. There isn't the sort of coordination that you'd expect. It's lots of different parts of the system trying to make the best to navigate through a system that they all find desperately frustrating. So we know we need to change it, and we're looking at a range of options for what that could look like, and looking at other examples. You know, so housing, I think, is quite interesting. They've got their Homes England working with authorities, but providing capacity building for parts of the country that don't have it. There are other examples in other countries. So we're trying to look at the full suite at the moment. This is absolutely the time to feed in ideas about what that looks like. But what we are very clear about is that the status quo is not fit for purpose. And if I had any doubt in my mind about that, I think the experience over the last couple of months as we've grappled with some of the challenges that we found within Eco4 and GBIS has focused the mind for me, because there wasn't a guiding mind. There isn't the sort of coordination that you'd expect. There isn't the accountability that you'd expect. And so from a consumer perspective, an absolute nightmare to navigate. From an installer perspective, an absolute nightmare to navigate. So it's not serving anyone. And we know that we need to do something different. And, I'm of the view that you don't get to large scale, quite big systemic interventions without proper coordination, and thinking about what that coordination looks like in a way that doesn't dampen or suffocate the innovation that we want to grow and that will only come, bottom up, I think is a thing that we're trying to navigate through at the moment.
And I think a kind of exercise that might be useful, both of the Food Poverty Strategy and the Warm Homes Plan in its consultative phases, is just to understand a little bit more. There's so much experience in the room, but generally about what forms of local coordination work. Is it the political will from the cabinet? Is it the risk appetite of the finance director? Is it their ability to do community engagement? Is it because they've got the enforcement teams? There's a whole bunch of weakness, failure points where either a national agency or a national agency trying to affect change in capabilities and local authorities able to do it. There's no question here, I'm just kind of mouthing off. I just think it might be a really interesting way of taking that consultative process through, because I haven't really seen anybody try to get to grips with why some places and why not other places. I think it would be really...
And look, just on that, so we're having conversations across the country with both our regional mayors but also local authorities. And what's been interesting for me is that, we've got a range of schemes in Scotland, schemes in Wales, schemes in our local authorities. And actually our local authority schemes seem to have a level of coordination and checks and balances that are delivering better outcomes in terms of performance and quality and standards. And I definitely think there is something for us to learn at. And, you know, candidly, our mayors are pretty ambitious, say that they are, you know, that they're not messing around with this government. They're very clear about what they want to do. They're very clear that there is a huge opportunity for them to use capabilities and capacity that they've built up in order to drive this agenda forward. So we are very keen to engage with them. But as you say, it's the areas that don't have, you know, ambitious, forward-leaning mayors where we cannot afford to let those people be left behind. And we've got to think about the right mechanism that supports them as well.
I know you're keen to go to Fishwick, so we'll get the invitation out to you as soon as you can. I'm change tack a little bit, not because I want to, you know, confuse the line, just I'm incapable of arranging things in any kind of relevant kind of sequence. But a couple of questions which I think it's worth just throwing in there. So the first one is about and we're keen to always bring it back to those missions. It's from Emma from SOS, Students Organising for Sustainability. How will you be able to improve knowledge on energy efficiency and housing from a younger age, about plans for citizenship lessons in schools, that whole Jesuit thing about getting them early and kind of capturing the person?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, look, I think the thing I would say is the level of, and I say this as a mom of 3 kids, with my children constantly schooling me on stuff, the level of awareness and understanding and knowledge around both climate change, the net zero transition, but what we need to do in response, I think with this generation of young kids is far better than when I was a child. So I think actually, to be fair to the education system, they're already doing that. And I think the thing that we can do to sort of complement it is make the expectation of the norm. And what I mean by that is, for too many kids, they're growing up in homes where it is the norm to be in a moldy, cold, damp home. That's just how it is. And what we can do is change that. And if you change the expectation of the norm, which is, you know, the stuff that we're trying to do in the private rented sector, the work that we're trying to do with the social housing sector, the work we want to do through the Warm Homes Plan, the Future Home Standard, which I know is something that people are exercise with, and we're working with MHCLG, is to make the norm. You don't have homes that are freezing cold, that are damp, that have mold and cost you a fortune. And then that alongside an education about, you know, what we need to do to deliver the climate crisis, I think is a thing that starts shifting that. So yes, there is an onus on young people, but I think there is a responsibility on us now in the here and now, the people that have the levers, whether that is national government, local government, huge partnership, network on the ground, the movement that's in this room, to make that not the norm. That is our job. That is our job for the next 10 to 15 years.
Apologies for the Jesuitical reference. That's my own school days coming out. I try to keep them repressed as far as I possibly can. A question about suppliers, not just in terms of kind of making money and debt. So it's from Harry, from Power Grid, another part of the energy sector. What more can we do to put pressure on suppliers to make sure they improve their customer service journeys, wait time, complaints, just that level of engagement? I think we saw all hands to the pump in the crisis, but we want to maintain those levels of focus on consumer vulnerability and support.
Yeah, and look, so I think the 2 things I'd say is, you know, I have the privilege of speaking with a lot of the chief execs of energy suppliers, and they are very alive to the fact that the quality of customer service is fundamental to the trust question. So I haven't had a single conversation where I don't feel that they get it. Mm-hmm. It's how you're translating the getting it to making sure it works at every part of your organization and system when you've got a big organization. And so, you know, we will do our job of engaging. One of the most helpful things that I've said to a lot of the charities is, you are our early warning system. So you will, through your call centers, through your engagement with consumers, pick up where there are problems. So where there are failures of billing, you know, the PPE scandal came first from, you know, charities saying, look, there is a massive problem before government even realized there was a problem. And I think the more intel that we can get, that means that we can have conversations to say, look, there is a problem, how are you responding to that problem? But I also think that there is a big role for the regulator. And in part why we are, you know, we were really clear that early on we wanted to do this review of Ofgem is to make sure that the regulator is very clear about its mandate in order to be that consumer champion. I always quote what the chair of Ofgem said, which is, we want, when people think consumer champion, we want them to think Ofgem, not Martin Lewis. And I was like, yes, that's exactly where we need to get to. So making sure it's clear about that mandate, but it's got the powers. So if you have things like automatic compensation when things go wrong, they will go wrong much less because the incentives are aligned with the outcome that we want to achieve. So I think that is a really important part. But I certainly my impression from all the conversations I've had is that industry gets this. They are as determined as we are to repair trust because their business model is predicated on trust. And so I think we've got an opportunity to come together to make sure that we do make, the experience of consumers as frictionless, as easy and as fair as possible. And we push up the ranking of energy in terms of kind of customer satisfaction.
Absolutely. There are many people from the energy suppliers, not only in the audience, but with us every step of the way. It's the elevation piece. Good luck to Jonathan for trying to kind of compete with Martin on that role. I was always struck by, when I was at Citizens Advice, the canary and the coal mine kind of reference is really, really crucial. It's kind of ringtail parakeets for us in South London, but it's canaries to make sure that things are evidenced, are surfaced as early and as powerfully as you can, sometimes without having the solution, just kind of making sure it's on front of people's minds. We've got time for another quick couple, I think, or maybe just one, actually, and then if you want to say anything at the end, that would be fantastic. And I have to ask, when a trustee puts a question forward, you have to answer it. So this is from Fraser, who's the Chief Exec of Energy Action Scotland, our sister organisation in Scotland. Should have a conversation about the lessons of Scotland, and it's the critical one because it speaks to our necessary levels of ambition and then the absolute determination to get there. But he frames it, given fuel poverty is recognised in legislation and its contributing factors are understood, how long does the Minister believe that it will be before it's eliminated? Or do we think there's always going to be some group of people that are always going to be in that situation? So is there a limit to our ambition, or does the consequence of building financial support and warm homes intervention and then electrification kind of models and clean heat power, is that an answer for us?
So I think the ambition has to be to eradicate it, because what are we all doing if that's not what we're trying to do? And the concept of locking this in legislation was seeded under the last Labour government, where the view is that you needed to hold government to account for delivering social outcomes that we thought were absolutely important. So that has to be the ambition. That doesn't mean it's easy. And so where I'm sitting now, I'd love to be in a position that I'm like, by 2030, it's done. And then my officials will scream at me. So look, I'm operating in the world that we have inherited. I'm very clear that the trajectory that we needed to be on in order to deliver that target, we are not on. That is not what we've inherited. Our job is now to accelerate that so we can shift the trajectory. But I think it would be a collective failure if we were in 2045 and we've done all the things that we needed to do to deliver clean power, to hit our goals in terms of climate, and fuel poverty was a reality. I think that would have been a systemic and structural failure of governments and the industry and a whole lot of people, and that is not an acceptable or a tenable position to be. So I am operating with the intention that as long as I'm in this job, I'm doing everything that we can do to eradicate it over time, and I'm laying the foundations that, politicians come and go. When I go, there is a legacy that others can build on. That's not what I've inherited, but that has to be what we leave as a government, so that, we look back in decades to come and we said, the thing that wasn't the norm, kids growing in homes that were warm, that didn't mean that their parents had to decide that they couldn't eat to heat the home, that is not the norm. That is the goal. That's the thing that drives me. That's the thing that we are focused on.
And I absolutely agree. It'll be a collective failure. It'll be a failure for us as well. This is the second time we've called it Beyond the Energy Crisis. And the crisis response was absolutely essential and necessary and urgent and short-term and expensive and pragmatic and all those things. And there is no question that organizations in this room would expect to have to maintain those levels of crisis intervention for some time, but collectively we have to think our way beyond them to identify something that is up to the task, that really just changes, shifts the dial kind of particularly. So look, is there anything you want to say before we bring it to an end?
Just a huge thank you. I meant it when I said the work that you are doing is so fundamental, and it actually gives me inspiration. This is a hard thing that we're trying to do, and it can feel very sort of lonely in government when you're trying to think about the levers that you're yanking in order to drive this in a really tough context. And actually there is inspiration and hope that comes knowing that we're working alongside people that every day are going out trying to make it as better as they can for people who we know are at the very sharp end of this. So a huge thank you. You certainly give me hope and inspiration, and together I am confident that we can take the task on.
Well, thank you for your times, and thank you to the Minister. Not only the amount of time the ministers give us, but I tell you, it's really unnerving. Because it's a venue, you actually can't see anybody at all. You just have these three sunlit kind of clouds above you. If anyone remembers of a certain age, the Chinese children's, oh, there you all are. The program Monkey, where you used to fly around on a cloud, that's how it feels. So the next session, we're going to have a break for about half an hour. The next session's at 11:45 about thinking through the fuel poverty strategies. But I was kind of serious at the start. The Minister says it can be lonely, so we have to untap the huge amount of insight and contribution that's available to her officials, swamp them with that experience to help them build the best plan they can and then implement it. Please take my business cards, because I put them there. I'll have to take them all home. I don't want to do that. Back at 11:45, well, great start to conference. See you in a bit.